Hello students, I am Professor Smitaja from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and as under the course banner Research Methodology, I am here to discuss the relevance epistemology. Let us discuss the relevance of epistemology in research, because when we discuss the paradigm, it is epistemology which is very important. So epistemology is of utmost importance in understanding anything, philosophy included. The various epistemological theories are merely ways in which we explore the world around us. The modern world, led by Western philosophers, insists that we use epistemological view of empiricism. This is the importance of epistemology in our modern understanding. Our knowledge, that is science, is based solely in empirical values and understanding. We must have data or facts that we can see, touch, hear, or otherwise experience with our sense. Epistemology is, as we know, the study of knowledge. Philosophy is the creation of knowledge. Actually, it is the first step in knowledge creation. Well, much has been written extensively, on a subject which one can call metamind. The metamind is the sum total of all the knowledge Homo sapiens species has ever created and will ever create. From the epistemological perspective, this knowledge does not exist in a single mind. Single mind droplets in the ocean. These droplets rise from the ocean, beginning with the birth of a mind built on the foundation of a newborn brain, and they return to the ocean at death of the mind and its owner. But left behind in the metamind are its thoughts. The ocean of human knowledge was built gradually from a tide pool starting 70,000 years ago, when the first Homo sapiens began to think with expressive language. The ocean now services billions of sapiens' mind. Now to philosophy. Within the metamind's ocean of knowledge are currents, some strong, some weak. Call these currents philosophies. Philosophies ebb and flow through the metamind. In the process, they collect internal mind, that is drops, trap them like sticky paper, and move them along through time like flotsam. Once a mind is trapped by a philosophy, only an epiphany will free it, but not really. It will be picked up by another philosophy. Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, he explains this process very well. He called these currents through the metamind paradigms. Kuhn's paradigms are science philosophies, but all dimensions of the human experience, medical, political, art, music, social, economic, religious, martial, functions the same way. They are driven forward, back, and sideways by philosophical currents. So, I guess I have addressed the question, why are philosophies important to epistemology? Not what was asked. But the answer was better than the question. Epistemological issues are additionally critical due to the literature's growing influence. Consider the difference between two similar research questions. Why do people believe in particular ideas? Versus, why do people believe misinformation? The former is value neutral as far as public opinion research goes, in that it implies an interest in examining general belief information. The latter, however, is value-laden in that it not only stigmatizes the belief and implies a distinction between the processes involved in believing misinformation and those involved in believing true information, but it also implies that the falseness of the misinformation is objectively verifiable. However, such epistemic certainty is not only established in some studies, but it is often not possible to establish at all, particularly for certain types of claims. Should such trends continue, the literature could become a vehicle for the stigmatization of opposite political beliefs. This is particularly concerning given the literature's call for far-reaching policies, which, however well-intentioned, often come with a cost of established norms of liberal democracy, in that if we can see a self-evident truth, then deliberation is no longer needed because only bad actors or the delusional could disagree. However, those who believe in ideas deemed misinformation by researchers might not have a disregard for truth or necessarily even be wrong. The misinformation researchers might be wrong. In epistemology, another critical question is, what do we know? Or what is the scope of our knowledge? When it comes to this overarching question, most philosophers will discuss a complex philosophical position of skepticism. According to Klein, skepticism is a philosophical view that we human beings lack knowledge about the external world, the past, and other minds beyond the contents of our own minds, and that we do not know as much as we think we do. Skeptics construct arguments to conclude that we know little to nothing. Global, most extreme skepticism claims that we do not or cannot have any knowledge, while local, that is less extreme, skepticism holds that we do or can have some knowledge, except for some particular domains, such as the external world, the past, and the other mind. Such bizarre conclusions are hard to believe, but are supported by some skeptical arguments that are quite plausible. Reflecting on skepticism, Lemos in 2007 formulated several skeptical arguments to show that we do not or cannot have any knowledge about the external world. Let us look at two of his plausibly skeptical arguments. The certainty argument: one cannot be certain about what the external world is like. One knows that P only if one is certain that P is. Therefore, one cannot know what the external world is like, the infallibility argument. We are not infallible about the existence and character of the external world. If S knows that P, then S is infallible about P. We do not have knowledge about the existence and characters of the external world. They ask questions like, how do we know what we claim to know? That's the classic epistemological question that we can see in a lot of theory and research textbooks. A researcher might assume, for example, that knowledge is already out there, just waiting to be discovered. And so, it's our job as researcher to uncover this universal, unchanging, and absolute truth. Even though skeptical arguments seem plausible, philosophers have made a variety of responses to the widespread skepticism. Some well-received responses include the undermining of skepticism itself, George Edward Moore's response, commonly known as Moore's response, and the fallibilism about knowledge. One of the responses to skepticism is the claim that skepticism is self-undermining. The skeptics, especially the most extreme one, claim to know that nothing can be known, and if that is so, how can they claim to know that? So it appears that the skeptics are undermining themselves. George Edward Moore, one of the well-known common sense philosophers of the 20th century, claimed that we as human beings know many things. We think, we know, and holds that the skeptic's conclusion of nearly universal ignorance must be mistaken. George Edward Moore, one of the well-known common sense philosophers of the 20th century, claimed that we as human beings know many things we think we know, and holds that a skeptic conclusion of nearly universal ignorance must be mistaken. Moore offers a simple but fairly adequate and anti-skeptical reasoning that we have two hands by holding up his two hands and while making certain gesture showing that there is one left hand and one right hand. Moore's proof goes to show that the external world does exist. Thus, it is reasonable not to abandon our knowledge claims. Understanding research philosophy is crucial for developing a coherent research design and selecting appropriate research methods. Whether you are engaged in quantitative research, qualitative research, or a mixed method approach, your research philosophy will guide your decision making throughout the research project. What differentiates knowledge from wisdom and opinion? In the study of epistemology, it may be helpful to differentiate some key terms, particularly knowledge, wisdom, and opinion. These terms indicate the extent to which we can or cannot claim to know things. Thus far, the term knowledge has been defined but is briefly mentioned again here to connect with the other two terms. Many epistemologists hold that knowledge is justified through belief. One can claim to know or have knowledge of something if one holds a true belief about it that is appropriately justified, meaning that one must have good reasons to believe that something is the case. However, some think that this definition of knowledge can be rendered to be more accurate. Some philosophers would substitute beliefs with a more precise term, such as psychological certainty or acceptance. So, they would prefer to say that knowledge entails justify psychological certainty or acceptance. Unlike knowledge and wisdom, an opinion is something that is not conclusive. It may be very subjective to the person expressing the opinion and open to further inquiry. However, our typical verbal exchange is made through the expression of personal opinion. An opinion can be belief, a point of view, or a statement that usually lacks factual accounts. Even though an opinion is regarded as an unsupported claim, collective opinions or opinions from professionals or experts can provide substantial merits for acceptance. The basic contention of the constructionist argument is that reality is socially constructed by and between the persons who experience it. It is a consequence of the context in which the action occurs and is shaped by the cultural, historical, political, and social norms that operate within that context and time. And that reality can be different for each of us based on our unique understandings of the world and our experience of it. Reality in this case is completely subjective and need not be something that can be shared by anyone else, but at the same time, it is independent of the person living it. The relationship between epistemology and method is rarely articulated through our formal coursework education, either at undergraduate or postgraduate level. Certainly, this is true in many psychological programs. Now, nowhere during the formal education was the connection between epistemology and method clearly explained. Indeed, the entire notion of a philosophical foundation to research was missing. Now, this is the high time to know about axiology, which refers to the researcher understanding of values and their role in research. It examines values, deals with issues of right and wrong, and measures the level of development and types of perceptual biases. Axiology explains the role and importance of the research process, considers the values researchers assign to their research, and guides their pursuit of knowledge. It makes the researcher consider the following question: what should be done to uphold and respect the right of each participant? What ethical principle will you as a researcher follow during your research? What are the cultural and intercultural issues to be considered in the research? How can I conduct the research in a respectful manner? How can we minimize or reduce risk during the research? So, researcher axiological stance in healthcare refers to their values, beliefs, and ethical positions that guide their research practices and interpretations of finding. Now, I can cite some examples of axiological stances that a researcher may take in healthcare or medical humanity. Patient-centeredness. This value emphasizes the importance of incorporating patients' perspectives, value, and preferences in healthcare or medical humanity in healthcare decision-making. For example, a research may prioritize qualitative research method to explore patients' experience and needs in a specific healthcare setting. Evidence-based practice, this value emphasizes the use of best available evidence to guide clinical decision making. For example, a researcher may conduct a randomized controlled trial to evaluate the effectiveness of new medication or intervention. Cultural humility. This value emphasizes the importance of acknowledging and respecting cultural differences and avoiding assumptions and stereotypes in healthcare interactions. For example, a researcher may use qualitative research methods to explore the perspectives and experiences of patients from diverse cultural backgrounds. When we talk of health equity, this value emphasizes the importance of addressing health disparities and promoting fairness and justice in healthcare. For example, a researcher may use a community-based participatory research approach to engage with marginalized or underrepresented population and identify solutions to health inequity. Epistemology in research with a feminist perspective refers to a philosophical approach within research that examines how knowledge is constructed through the lens of gender, specifically analyzing how traditional research methods may disadvantage women and marginalized groups, and advocating for methodologies that center the experiences and perspectives of those often excluded from knowledge production. It emphasizes the idea that knowledge is situated and influenced by one's social position, including gender, and therefore researchers should actively consider these power dynamics when conducting research. So the key aspects of feminist epistemology in research, if we talk in terms of relevance, situated knowledge, the belief that knowledge is not objective and universal, but is shaped by the researcher's social position, including their gender, and therefore researcher should acknowledge and analyze their own biases. If we talk of a standpoint theory, a core concept in feminist epistemology which argues that marginalized groups like women can have a unique and valuable perspective on social issues due to their lived experiences of operation. Critiquing traditional research method, feminist researchers often critique traditional research methods for being androcentric, centered on male experiences, and for potentially silencing or misrepresenting women's voices. So critical theory refers to a family of theories that aim at critique and transformation of society by integrating normative perspective which empirically informed analysis of society's conflict, contradictions, and tendencies. In a narrow sense, critical theory, often denoted with capital letters, refers to the work of several generations of philosophers and social theorists in the Western European Marxist tradition known as the Frankfurt School. So, prioritizing women's experiences, a focus on actively including women's perspective and lived experiences as central to research question and methodology. And participatory research methods that involves actively engaging research participants in the research process to empower them and ensure their voices are heard. Now, certain examples of feminist epistemological approaches. Qualitative research method, in-depth interviews, focus groups, ethnography are often favored as they allow for richer exploration of individuals' experiences and perspective. And when we talk of intersectionality, it examines how gender intersects with other social identities like race, class, sexuality to understand complex experiences of operation. If we talk of reflexivity, a critical self-awareness of the researcher's own biases and how they may influence the research process. Criticism of feminist epistemology may be like that it is the philosophy of science studies the ways in which gender does and ought to influence our conceptions of knowledge, knowers, and practices of enquiry and justification. It identifies how dominant conceptions and practices of knowledge attribution, acquisition, and justification disadvantage women and other subordinated groups, and strives to reform them to serve the interest of these groups. So, various feminist epistemologists and philosophers of science argue that dominant knowledge practices disadvantage women by excluding them from enquiry, denying them epistemic authority, denigrating feminine cognitive style, producing theories of women that represent them as inferior or significant only in the ways they serve male interest, producing theories of social phenomena that render women's activities and interest or gender power relations invisible, and producing knowledge that is not useful for people in subordinate position or that reinforce gender and other social hierarchies. A significant strength of the critical theories paradigm is that it combines theory and practice, seeking to create actual change from theoretical development. Rather than seeking prediction and control or explanation and understanding, critical theories seek social changes. The intent behind these theoretical perspectives is to help empower those whose worldviews and ideological perspectives have not found equality in social context. At their best, critical theories have the potential to enact large-scale social change for both large and small groups of people. So, critical theory is any research that challenges those conventional knowledge bases and methodologies, whether quantitative or qualitative, that makes claim to scientific objectivity. Critical research attempts to reveal the socio-historical specificity of knowledge and to shed light on how particular knowledges reproduce structural relations of inequality and operation. Critical theory is concerned with the critical meanings of experiences as they relate to gender, race, class, and other kinds of social operation. Feminist epistemologists trace these failures to flawed conceptions of knowledge, knowers, objectivity, and scientific methodology. They offer diverse accounts of how to overcome these failures. They also aim to explain why the entry of women and feminist scholars into different academic disciplines had generated new questions, theories, methods, and findings. Show how gender and feminist values and perspectives have played a crucial causal role in these transformations. Promote theories that add egalitarian and liberation movements and defend these developments as epistemic advance. So, standpoint epistemology in general theories claim to represent the world from an epistemically advantaged, socially situated perspective. A complete standpoint theory must specify the social location of the advantaged perspective, its scope, the subject matters over which it claims advantage, the aspect of the social location that generate epistemic advantage, for example, social role or subjective identity, the ground of its advantage, what justifies its claim to superiority, the type of epistemic superiority it claims, for example, greater accuracy or greater ability to represent fundamental truth. The other perspective relative to which it claims advantage and modes of access to that perspective is occupying the social location necessary or sufficient for getting access to the perspective. Many limited claims to epistemic advantage on behalf of particular perspectives are uncontroversial. Auto mechanics are in a better position than auto consumer to know what is wrong with their cars. Practical experience in fulfilling the mechanic's role grounds mechanics' epistemic advantage, which claims superior reliability. Standpoint theories usually claims that the perspectives of subordinated social groups have an epistemic advantage regarding politically contested topic related to their subordination relative to the perspectives of the groups that dominate them. Classically, standpoint theory claims that the standpoint of the subordinated is advantaged. First, in revealing fundamental social regularities. Second, in exposing social arrangements as contingent and susceptibility to change through concerted action. And third, in representing the social world in relation to universal human interest. By contrast, dominant group standpoints represent only surface social regularities in relation to dominant group interest and misrepresent them as necessary, natural, or universally advantageous. Grounds of feminist standpoint theory claims that the standpoint of women has an epistemic advantage over phenomena in which gender is implicated, relative to theories that make sexist or androcentric assumptions. Variants of feminist standpoint theory ground this epistemic advantage in different features of women's social situation by analogy with different strands of Marxist epistemology. So, these epistemological assumptions are reflected in the theoretical perspectives, methodology, and methods of research study. In other words, depending on a researcher's belief about what can be known ontology and how to approach coming to know it epistemology, different decisions will be made toward designing an effective study. These decisions are grounded in a theoretical perspective. In essence, an encapsulation of philosophical assumptions that form a cohesive way of viewing relationships between the sorts of knowledge we seek and what must be done to produce it. Thus, a theoretical perspective provides an explanatory stance of our pursuits and our actions. Methodology is sometimes referred to as a framework of logically related means and ends to guide research design, or as the support rationale for decision made in designing methods for data collection and analysis, whereas methods are the hands-on procedures or actions used to gather and analyze data. With this, I conclude the relevance epistemology, and we have seen that while processing any research, methodology is very important. And if we talk of methodology, it is the paradigms like epistemology, ontology, and critical theories. Now, epistemology, which is the base of the knowledge, and what is the research? Research is based on the knowledge, previous knowledge, and the assumption, the coming up the knowledge. So it is all about the philosophy of knowledge. That is why it is important to know about epistemology and its relevance. Because in my opinion, research is not a random activity. It is a very calculative, serious, systematic, cohesive study and process of gaining knowledge. With this, I conclude the discussion today. Let us meet in another lecture. Till then, thank you.